I never thought I'd watch my family's legacy burn to the ground while someone stood there smiling. The flames weren't the worst part. It was the HOA president blocking the fire truck, live streaming our destruction as if it were entertainment. She thought she held all the power, but what she didn't know was that her every word, her every move, was building the case that would end her life as she knew it. The night my family cabin went up in flames will never leave me. Even now, months later, if I close my eyes, I can smell the acrid smoke, feel the way the cold mountain air clawed at my lungs, while the fire raged hotter than anything I'd ever seen. Our cabin at Silver Creek had stood for nearly 80 years, built by my grandfather in 1942, when this mountain was nothing but wilderness and determination. It wasn't grand by modern standards, but to me and my 16-year-old son Caleb, it was sacred ground, a place where memory and legacy lived in the wood grain of every wall. That night, we stood shivering on the snow-dusted ground, watching the east wall collapse in a shower of sparks. And blocking the only road up to our lot was Linda Marshall, clipboard in hand, live streaming our devastation to an audience of strangers online. The fire truck from Silver Creek's volunteer department had arrived in less than 10 minutes, remarkable considering the icy roads, but they couldn't reach the hydrant because Linda parked her white SUV across the driveway. "This property is under violation," she shouted, her voice cutting through the crackling fire like a judge's gavel. "No emergency services are authorized until outstanding compliance fees are paid." I remember the look on Chief Rodriguez's face. He'd been fighting fires in these mountains for 2 decades, and yet he froze for a moment, as if he couldn't process what he was hearing. "Ma'am," he said, "this is a structure fire. Move your vehicle now." Linda just raised her phone higher, letting the glow of the screen reflect her smirk. To her audience, 14 viewers at that moment, she explained how our family had defied community regulations for years, and how finally the rules were catching up to us. Caleb clung to my arm, tears streaking his smoke-stained face. He whispered, "Dad, why is she doing this? She wants us to lose everything." I didn't have an answer. How could I explain to my son that sometimes people with small scraps of authority twist it into cruelty, convincing themselves that destroying others is the same as protecting order? I pulled out my phone and hit record, even though my hands trembled so hard the video shook. If she wanted a performance, then she would get one, but not in the way she intended. Rodriguez finally maneuvered a second truck to push her SUV out of the way, but by then the roof had already caved in. The fire moved unnaturally fast, almost as if it had been fed gasoline. I knew then this wasn't just negligence or bureaucratic overreach. This was deliberate. When the last embers died, the cabin was reduced to rubble and ash. The stone chimney remained a blackened monument to 3 generations of work. Among the debris were charred fragments of photo albums my late wife had kept, the fishing rod Caleb's grandfather had taught him with, and my father's medals from Vietnam. Gone. All of it gone, while Linda walked up to me, her expression feigning sympathy but her words dripping with venom. "I'm sorry it came to this," she said, lowering her clipboard like it was some kind of holy relic. "But sometimes enforcement has to be tough. Maybe now you'll understand why we have standards." That moment was when something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage I had expected to feel that. What I felt instead was a cold, unshakable certainty. Linda Marshall believed she had broken me, that she had reduced my family to ashes along with the cabin. But in truth, she had crossed into territory she could never walk back from. She had obstructed emergency services, she had gloated on camera, and most damning of all, she had revealed more than she realized to the wrong people at the wrong time. I didn't tell Caleb what I was thinking, as we sat on the cold stone foundation waiting for the sun to rise. He hugged his knees, staring at the smoke that curled into the star-studded Colorado sky. "Dad," he whispered, "the pictures of Grandpa. Mom's albums, all gone." I put my arm around him and said, "The only thing I could. The memories aren't gone, son, and sometimes when we lose everything we find out what we're really capable of." But silently I made a vow. Linda thought her live stream made her untouchable, that she had documented her authority. What she had really done was build a chain of evidence, one that would eventually drag her into a courtroom where clipboards and cheap tape measures held no weight. The following morning, as investigators from the county walked through the wreckage, Linda was already spinning her story. On her Facebook group, Silver Creek Strong, she posted that our cabin had suspicious financial ties, hinting that we had orchestrated the blaze ourselves for insurance. She wrote with the confidence of someone who assumed her narrative would drown out the truth. And in the short term, she wasn't entirely wrong. Whispers spread around town. At the grocery store, people avoided eye contact. Some neighbors offered awkward condolences, but others just muttered about insurance fraud. I kept my silence, because my father, long before he became a federal judge, had taught me something simple: preparation beats outrage. Document everything, wait for the right moment, and let the evidence tell the story. Caleb didn't know that about his grandfather yet, but he would soon. Standing amid the ashes with the air still reeking of smoke, I promised myself this Linda Marshall had made a mistake that would cost her far more than she could imagine. She thought the fire ended our story. She had no idea it was just the beginning. 2 weeks before the fire, life in Silver Creek still felt deceptively normal. The mountain air was crisp, and snow was beginning to gather on the ridges that towered above our little community. For me, the cabin wasn't just a structure on a quarter-acre lot. It was a story written in timber and stone, every board, carrying the weight of my family's history. My grandfather had laid the foundation himself, my father had expanded the living room during the 70s, and I had patched the roof more times than I cared to count. For Caleb, my 16-year-old son, it was the place where he learned to fish split logs and understand what legacy really meant. Silver Creek had always been an odd mix of rugged independence and enforced conformity. When I was a child, the neighbors helped one another survive brutal winters. People looked out for each other because mountain living demanded it. Over time, though, the community shifted. Outsiders arrived with vacation home dreams and resort town expectations. With them came the rise of the Homeowners Association, which began innocently enough collecting dues for road plowing and water maintenance. But under new leadership, it morphed into something more insidious, an instrument of control. Enter Linda Marshall. If you asked her, she wasn't just HOA president, she was the guardian of community standards. She first appeared at our door one Saturday morning, with a metal tape measure dangling from one hand and a bubblegum pink clipboard clutched in the other. The tape still had its $12.49 Walmart sticker attached, which should have been my first warning sign about the professionalism I was dealing with. She knocked twice hard and impatient, like she already owned the property. "Mr. Hayes," she announced without greeting when I opened the door. "I'm conducting mandatory compliance inspections for the Silver Creek Homeowners Association." Her voice had that sharp, performative edge people use when they're speaking to a crowd, even though it was just me and Caleb stacking firewood on the porch. I glanced at Caleb, who rolled his eyes the way only teenagers can. "What's this about?" I asked, keeping my tone polite. "According to Section 12B of our community regulations," she said, raising her clipboard as if it were holy scripture, "your structure appears to exceed the maximum permitted height by approximately." She unfurled her measuring tape, dragging the cold metal line across the snow-crusted ground 3 inches. 3 inches, Caleb muttered, stopping mid-motion with a log in his arms. He leaned toward me and whispered not quietly enough, "Why doesn't she just measure the sky while she's at it?" I stifled a laugh, but Linda's eyes flicked up sharply, narrowing with disapproval. She had definitely heard him. Her inspection turned into a circus. She extended the tape 3 times each attempt, producing a different number. She filmed herself with her phone propped awkwardly against a snowbank, speaking to a live stream audience that never seemed to rise above 10 viewers. "Silver Creek residents," she declared dramatically, "this is evidence of a clear violation." She spoke with the pomp of a news anchor uncovering a government scandal. What she ignored deliberately, I suspected, was that our cabin was grandfathered in under every HOA regulation ever passed. My grandfather had built it under county codes that predated the association by decades. My father's additions were fully permitted. I had done every maintenance project according to modern standards. None of it mattered to Linda. Her mission wasn't safety or aesthetics, it was power. When she finally finished her inspection, she scribbled exaggerated notes on her clipboard with a bright pink pen and announced, "You will receive an official notice within 48 hours. Immediate remediation will be required. Non-compliance may result in penalties or liens." Then she strutted to her white SUV and drove away with a triumphant smile. Caleb stood frozen wood, still balanced in his arms. "Dad, she's insane, right? She can't actually make us cut down part of Grandpa's cabin because of 3 inches." I wanted to reassure him, but I knew better. "She can try," I said finally. "But trying and succeeding are 2 different things." The violation notice arrived 2 days later by certified mail, complete with self-designed letterhead that looked like it had been pieced together from free templates. Fonts clashed, spacing was inconsistent, and Linda's signature was in oversized cursive, as though the flourish itself carried legal weight. She fined us $500 for architectural non-compliance. I called the number on the notice to request an independent survey. Linda's response came quickly, her tone smug. "According to Silver Creek regulations, HOA leadership measurements are considered final unless contradicted by a licensed engineer hired at the property owner's expense." "And where are those regulations published?" I asked. "They are proprietary documents," she replied, "available only to members in good standing. Since you're currently in violation, your standing is questionable." It was the kind of circular logic that makes you want to laugh if it weren't so dangerous. That day, I started documenting everything times dates, phone calls, letters, even screenshots of her Facebook posts. Years of debugging code had taught me that every system, no matter how rigged, has flaws. You just have to be patient enough to find them. The following week, Linda held a community meeting in the recreation hall. Out of 50 potential residents, only 3 people showed up: Linda, her husband, and their college-age daughter. But Linda behaved like she was addressing the state senate. She rolled out a PowerPoint presentation titled, "Protecting Our Community Values Through Rigorous Enforcement." Slide after slide showed pictures of our cabin with arrows pointing to supposed violations, a roofline, 2 tall windows that invaded community privacy, even our chimney, which she claimed disrupted the visual harmony of the mountain view. Halfway through, the back door creaked open. It was Martha Johnson, 72 years old, and tougher than any HOA president could dream of being. She had lived in Silver Creek longer than anyone but my family. Martha waited patiently until Linda reached her closing remarks, then raised her hand. "Excuse me," Martha said in her firm but kind voice, "but do you know that the Hayes cabin was built in 1942? I remember when they hauled in the lumber on mules. It was here before the road was even paved." Linda didn't blink. According to Silver Creek regulations, grandfather clauses don't override current standards. Martha arched an eyebrow. "What grandfather clauses? I was on the original HOA board in 2087, and we never voted for height restrictions." The silence that followed was heavier than the snow outside. Linda stammered something about updated bylaws, but I already knew the truth. In my review of old records, I had discovered her term as HOA president had technically expired 6 months earlier. No new election had ever been held. She was operating without legal authority, issuing fines and notices as if her title alone made them valid. After the meeting, Martha pulled me aside. "That woman's bluffing, and you know it. If you need proof, I'll testify." Her weathered hand squeezed my shoulder with surprising strength. "Don't let her bully you." Driving home that night, Caleb asked quietly, "So what happens now?" He looked older than his 16 years, his voice stripped of the usual teenage sarcasm. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "Now we start keeping records. Everything she does, every word she says. One day, Caleb, she'll hang herself with her own rope. We just have to be ready." I didn't yet know how prophetic those words would become. The violation notice sat on my kitchen table like a scarlet letter, its ridiculous fonts and cheap formatting screaming authority it did not actually have. Caleb leaned over it, scowling. "It's all fake, isn't it? She can't just make this stuff up and expect people to believe her." "She can," I answered, "and she does." I slid the notice into a manila folder already filling with printed emails, screenshots of her social media posts, and notes from every conversation we'd had. "But remember this, Caleb, just because someone claims authority doesn't mean they actually have it. Authority without legitimacy is like a shadow, it disappears the moment you shine the right light on it." That became my mantra. I documented everything. Every word Linda Marshall uttered, every letter she mailed, every absurd claim she posted online. To most people, it probably looked like I was obsessing. To me, it was building a case brick by brick, the way my grandfather once laid the cabin's stone foundation. The absurdity escalated quickly. A week after her so-called inspection, I received a second letter, this one, alleging that our woodpile presented a fire hazard and needed to be reduced by half. That same weekend, she posted a video claiming that the smoke from our chimney had unacceptable environmental impact on community aesthetics. Caleb nearly choked on his cocoa when he heard that one. So now smoke offends her. It would have been funny if it weren't so dangerous. People in Silver Creek started whispering some parroting Linda's language about non-compliance. Others looked at us with pity. And then one evening, while I was sorting through my growing file of evidence, Martha Johnson knocked on the door. She sat at our kitchen table sipping tea, her gray hair pulled back in its usual no-nonsense bun. "I've been around long enough to know when someone's bluffing," she said. "And Linda Marshall is bluffing. Her term as HOA president ended last summer. The bylaws are clear. Annual elections are required. No election was ever held. She's a squatter in office, and every paper she signed is as worthless as the paper it's printed on." Her words were confirmation of what I had already suspected, but hearing it from Martha gave it weight. This wasn't just neighborly speculation. She had been there since the beginning part of the original HOA board back in 2087. If she's operating illegally, I asked, why hasn't anyone stopped her? Martha's lips tightened. "Because people are scared. She bullies them with paperwork and fines. Most folks just pay up or stay quiet, hoping she doesn't target them next. But you're the first one she picked a real fight with." I sat back, exhaling slowly. Fear. That was her true weapon. Not rules, not authority, just fear. Caleb slammed his fist against the table. So what? We just sit here and let her ruin our lives. She's making stuff up. Everyone can see it. His voice cracked with frustration. I looked at my son. 16 years old, but already forced to carry burdens. No teenager should have to. No, I told him. We don't sit back. But we don't rush in swinging either. We build, patiently, methodically. She thinks she's clever because she live streams everything, because she creates paper trails to make herself look official. What she doesn't realize is that those same trails are evidence against her. Caleb frowned. Evidence of what I didn't have the heart to say it out loud yet, that I suspected she was planning something bigger, something more dangerous than fines or notices. But deep down I knew, people like Linda don't stop once they get a taste of power. They escalate. The next community meeting proved it. She had booked the town hall and sent out glossy flyers paid for no doubt with HOA dues. The agenda addressing ongoing compliance issues. I showed up with my notebook, my folder, and Martha by my side. Caleb came too, though. I could see how much he hated being in that room. The hall was nearly empty, just a handful of neighbors sitting with coats, still on looking uncomfortable. Linda stood at the front, with her pink clipboard, her husband Frank by her side, and their college-age daughter filming everything on an iPad. She launched into a PowerPoint presentation, complete with arrows and diagrams, accusing our cabin of every possible sin. Slide 3 roofline violates Mountain View standards. Slide 4, window placement invades neighbor privacy. Slide 5, foundation predates seismic safety codes. The performance was equal parts absurd and chilling. She spoke with a certainty that left little room for doubt, as if she truly believed her word was law. And as her daughter's iPad panned across the room, I realized this wasn't about convincing the handful of residents present. It was about the audience she was cultivating online. Martha raised her hand. Linda, she said firmly, I was on the board in 2087 when this HOA was founded. There were no height restrictions, no roofline standards, nothing like what you're claiming now. And your term as president. It ended 6 months ago. You're not even in office. The silence that followed was palpable. Frank shifted uncomfortably. Even Jessica lowered her iPad for a moment. But Linda, she didn't flinch. She smiled, a tight, brittle smile, and said, according to Silver Creek, regulations continuity of leadership is allowed in the absence of formal elections. And as acting president, my authority stands until further notice. It was a lie, and she knew it. But she delivered it with such confidence that for a moment some in the room seemed to believe her. That was Linda's gift, the ability to blur reality through sheer force of will. After the meeting, as people shuffled out quickly to avoid being cornered, Martha leaned in close to me. She's dangerous, she whispered. Not just petty. Dangerous. Driving home in the dark, Caleb stared out the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. Dad, he said quietly, you always tell me to stand up for what's right. So when are we going to do it? When are we going to stop her? His words hit me harder than I expected, because he was right. My father had taught me that truth prevails when you prepare carefully. But Caleb had inherited a world where lies travel faster than facts, where live streams and viral posts shape reality. If I didn't act soon, my son would see me as a hypocrite, a man who preached justice but cowered in silence. I put a hand on his shoulder. We will, I promised, but not on her terms. We'll do it the right way. What I didn't know then was that Linda was already planning her next move, and it wouldn't involve letters or PowerPoints. The game was about to change, and the stakes were about to rise higher than I could have imagined. If Linda Marshall's theatrics had been irritating before, what happened next proved she was escalating into something much darker. The violation letters and staged community meetings were only the beginning. She wanted a fight, and she wanted an audience to watch it unfold. The following Tuesday evening, she announced another special meeting. Caleb and I almost didn't go. We were both exhausted from weeks of harassment, but Martha insisted. If you don't show up, she'll say you're hiding. Better to face her, even if it's unpleasant. We walked into the community hall to find Linda already set up like she was hosting a press conference. A projector lit the wall with the title, Safeguarding Silver Creek Holding Violators Accountable. A stack of handouts sat on every chair. Her daughter Jessica once again manned the iPad live streaming to the growing Facebook group Linda had cultivated. This time, nearly 20 residents showed up, drawn by curiosity or maybe by fear of missing what Linda would claim about them next. Her presentation was relentless. She pointed at photographs of my cabin from every possible angle annotated with garish red arrows. Notice here, she said, the unlawful roofline extension which compromises the mountain view shed. She flipped to another slide. And here, the east-facing windows improperly aligned, posing privacy risks to neighboring parcels. At one point, she even claimed the chimney foundation built by my grandfather in the 1942nd might be unstable under current seismic codes. Caleb muttered under his breath, "This is insane. She's just making things up as she goes." I hushed him, but I couldn't disagree. Then came the twist. Linda clicked to her final slide, a dramatic image of flames superimposed behind our cabin. This, she announced, is why we enforce compliance. Non-compliant structures increase fire risks, insurance premiums, and lower property values for the entire community. It was theater, pure and simple. But it was dangerous theater because her words carried just enough technical jargon to sound legitimate to people who didn't know better. A murmur ran through the room. Some neighbors frowned, but others nodded reluctantly, as though afraid disagreeing might make them Linda's next target. Martha stood. "Linda," she said firmly, "you have no authority to issue citations. Your term ended months ago, and no one here ever voted for these so-called height restrictions." Linda didn't even blink. "According to Silver Creek continuity regulations," she replied smoothly, "leadership remains in effect until a new election is certified. As acting president, my authority is valid." It was a lie, but she delivered it with such conviction that a few neighbors actually applauded. Caleb looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Dad, we can't just let her get away with this." That night after the meeting, I sat with him at our kitchen table. He was restless, bouncing his leg, clearly frustrated. "We should fight back online," he said. "Expose her. Post everything she's said and done." I shook my head. "Social media battles feel satisfying, but they rarely win in the long run. She thrives on drama. The more attention we give her online, the more powerful she feels. No, what we need is evidence. Hard, irrefutable evidence. But isn't that what you're already doing? Writing notes, saving letters." "Yes," I said, tapping the thickening folder on the table. "But it has to be airtight. If this goes to court, it has to survive legal scrutiny." He didn't look convinced. To a teenager, patience feels like surrender. But my father had drilled into me that preparation beats outrage every time. Caleb would understand one day if we survived this. What we didn't know was how quickly Linda was planning to raise the stakes. 2 nights later, around 11 p.m., I saw headlights sweep across the snow outside our cabin. I peered through the blinds and spotted a familiar SUV slowing near the edge of our lot. Linda. She idled for several minutes, jotting notes on her clipboard while Jessica filmed from the passenger seat. Then slowly they drove away. The next morning, a fresh violation notice appeared in my mailbox: $750 fine for improper firewood storage. According to Linda's handwritten notes, our stacked logs were too close to the structure and presented a wildfire hazard. Caleb crumpled the notice in his fist. "She was spying on us, Dad. She came here at night just to invent something." He was right. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was surveillance. The following week, Martha dropped by with something that made my stomach tighten. "I think you'll want to see this," she said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "My security cameras face the main road. Look at the time stamps. On the footage, Linda's SUV appeared not once, but 3 separate times, always late at night, always stopping near our property. In one clip, Jessica got out with a flashlight, scanning our yard before hurrying back into the car. "This isn't enforcement," Martha said grimly. "This is stalking." I thanked her, though. My hands were trembling as I pocketed the drive. Caleb stared at me, jaw clenched. "So what now? We go to the police, right?" "Not yet," I said. "We build the case. If we go too soon, she'll spin it as harassment. But with enough proof, she won't be able to spin her way out." Even as I said it, though, a sense of unease gnawed at me. Linda wasn't satisfied with fines or intimidation. Her fixation was too personal, her obsession too consuming. She wasn't just trying to humiliate us, she was setting the stage for something catastrophic. One night as Caleb slept, I sat alone at the kitchen table, reviewing the growing pile of evidence. Letters, screenshots, timestamps, footage. It was a meticulous record of Linda's madness. But it wasn't enough. Something bigger was coming. I could feel it, and I was right. Because less than 2 weeks later, in the dead of night, flames would engulf our cabin. And Linda Marshall would be there standing in the road with her clipboard raised like a weapon, making sure the firefighters couldn't save a single piece of our history. But on that quiet night, all I could do was sit in the dim glow of the lamp, vow to myself that whatever she was planning, I would be ready. Or at least I thought I would. It happened on a Tuesday night in late January, the kind of night when mountain silence is so complete you can hear the shift of snow sliding from a branch. Caleb and I had decided to stay at the cabin for a few days, hoping to escape the constant harassment. I'd also brought up new security cameras, convinced Linda was watching us too closely to ignore. The cold bit through the cracks of the old window frames, but there was comfort in the familiar creak of the floorboards, the smell of pinewood smoke curling from our chimney. At 2:17 a.m., the alarm shattered that quiet. It was so piercing, so sudden, I thought at first it was some kind of glitch. Then came the smell, the acrid tang of smoke so thick I could taste it in my throat. Dad Caleb's voice cut through the darkness. I rushed to his room, threw open the door, and found him wide-eyed coughing. Together we stumbled outside, boots crunching into the snow. What I saw stole the breath from my lungs. Flames already clawed up the east wall of the cabin, roaring higher than seemed possible in such a short time. Fire doesn't usually spread like that, not in snow, not in freezing air. The speed screamed of accelerant. The fire leapt from wall to roofline within minutes, sparks showering down against the snow like fireworks. Caleb froze, paralyzed by the sight of everything he'd ever known burning away. I had to drag him further into the yard just as part of the roof collapsed with a thunderous crack. My phone nearly slipped from my hands as I dialed 911. The operator's calm voice belied the urgency. The Silver Creek Volunteer Fire Department was on its way. Response time would be under 10 minutes. Relief flooded me. 10 minutes, we could still save most of it. But fate had other plans. The fire truck arrived, its siren echoing through the valley headlights, cutting through the smoke. And there, already waiting in the middle of the narrow access road, was Linda Marshall. Her white SUV blocked the way like a barricade, its hazard lights flashing. She stood in front of it, clipboard raised, phone angled perfectly to capture herself and the inferno behind us. "This property has outstanding HOA violations," she barked, her voice carried by the cold night air. "According to Silver Creek regulations, emergency services cannot proceed without proof of compliance." Chief Rodriguez, a seasoned firefighter I'd seen battle wild blazes in the summer, stepped down from the truck. His face was carved with disbelief. "Ma'am, move your vehicle. Now, we have an active structure fire." Linda didn't budge. She pointed her clipboard at our burning cabin as if it were proof of her righteousness. "No fire safety assessment fees have been paid. Providing services would be a violation of community insurance policies." Behind her, Jessica's phone streamed the entire thing live. 14 viewers watched her smirk, watched our family history go up in flames, and then she said something that froze my blood. "I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Some people think they're above Silver Creek regulations. Tonight proves they're not." The fire roared higher. Caleb sobbed beside me, his arms wrapped tight around himself as if holding in the grief. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking so badly I thought I'd drop it, and hit record. Every word Linda spoke, every smug expression, I caught it all. Rodriguez, faced with the impossible, made a split-second decision. He radioed for backup from the next district, then used his own truck to push Linda's SUV off the road. But by then, the cabin was beyond saving. Flames consumed the roof, walls, buckled windows, exploded outward from the heat. The structure collapsed into a storm of embers that lit the mountainside like a macabre bonfire. Friends from the next town arrived with a water tanker, but all they could do was prevent the blaze from spreading to the forest. For 3 hours I stood there helpless, watching 80 years of legacy crumble into ash. My father's medals, my wife's photo albums, Caleb's childhood fishing rod, all of it turned to nothing. When at last the fire burned itself out, only the stone chimney remained, standing like a gravestone against the pale dawn. My son sat on the foundation, his face streaked with soot and tears. "Dad," he whispered, his voice raw, "the pictures, all of Mom's albums, they're gone." I sat beside him, put my arm around his shoulders, and forced my own grief down deep. "The memories aren't gone," I told him, "and sometimes losing everything shows us what we're truly capable of." Linda approached as if she were the one offering comfort. Her expression twisted into mock sympathy. "I'm sorry it came to this," she said, "but tough enforcement is sometimes necessary. Maybe now you understand why we have regulations." For the first time since the fire began, I felt something solid inside me, not anger but resolve. She thought she had broken us, reduced us to ash. She thought this was victory. But what she had really done was expose herself. She had obstructed emergency services. She had gloated on camera. She had documented her crime for the world to see. I didn't tell Caleb that morning. He was too devastated to hear it. But as the sun rose over the smoking ruin of our cabin, I made a vow. Linda Marshall had made the mistake of confusing cruelty with authority, and soon she would learn the difference. The days after the fire blurred together into a haze of smoke, paperwork, and whispered judgment. Our cabin still smoldered when the insurance adjusters arrived, pacing around the charred ruins with clipboards of their own, snapping photographs of what little remained. They didn't look at me or Caleb as people who had just lost everything. They looked at us like a claim number, a liability, a problem to be contained. Neighbors trickled by some with casseroles or murmured condolences, but their eyes betrayed unease. A few believed Linda's version of events, that I'd burned my own cabin for the insurance money. Others simply didn't want to cross her. It was easier to nod along with the HOA president than risk becoming her next target. Caleb barely spoke. He spent hours scrolling on his phone, his face lit by the sickly glow of Facebook posts. Linda had wasted no time. She launched a group called Silver Creek Safety Watch, posting daily updates about suspicious fires and insurance fraud schemes. She painted me as a reckless homeowner who endangered the entire community. Her words dripped with righteous indignation, and to my disgust they were working. The group swelled to nearly 200 members within a week, most from nearby towns, people who didn't know me but loved a good drama. Caleb slammed his phone down one night, his eyes glassy. "Dad, they're saying we planned it. They're saying I knew that I wasn't even crying in the video." His voice cracked raw with teenage vulnerability. "Why aren't you fighting back? Why aren't you telling everyone what really happened? I wanted to. God, I wanted to scream the truth until the whole world heard me. But I knew better. My father, long before he became a federal judge, taught me that the court of public opinion is a circus. Outrage burns fast and bright, but rarely changes anything. Evidence, that's what matters. Documentation, testimony, proof that can withstand scrutiny. I took Caleb's hand. I know you want me to post something, but the more noise we make online, the more power we give her. What we need is patience. And proof." He pulled away, angry. "That just looks like you're letting her win." It gutted me to see the disappointment in his eyes. For 16 years I'd taught him that truth mattered, that doing the right thing was worth the cost. And now, as the world around us believed lies, he saw me as weak. But I couldn't let anger guide me. Anger makes you sloppy. Preparation makes you dangerous. 2 days later, Martha Johnson showed up at my door with a manila envelope. "I've been keeping quiet," she said, lowering her voice, "but I think it's time." She handed me a flash drive inside a plastic bag, security footage from my driveway. "It shows Linda's SUV driving past your place around 1:30 the night of the fire. Not once, 3 times in the week before." My heart hammered as I opened the files on my laptop. Grainy video headlights sweeping across the road. Linda's white SUV clear as day. In one clip, Jessica climbed out with a flashlight, scanning the edges of our lot before scurrying back inside. Caleb leaned over my shoulder, his eyes wide. "She was planning it," he whispered. "She set us up." Martha placed a hand on my arm. "That woman's been poisoned since she got here. Most folks are too scared to say it, but I'll testify if you need me. Don't let her bully you, son. You've got more allies than you think." Her courage lit something inside me. It was one thing to suspect Linda of malice. It was another to have evidence. I organized the files, added timestamps, and placed them into the growing binder of documentation I'd been keeping. Every notice, every violation letter, every absurd accusation, I lined them up like dominoes. But Linda wasn't done. The very next day, she launched her most brazen attack, yet a photo essay on social media titled "The Truth About the Haze, Fire Evidence You Haven't Seen." 15 images, each more twisted than the last. A screenshot of me standing near the flames with the caption, "Why isn't he crying if this is a tragedy?" A still of Caleb's tear-streaked face, annotated with arrows suggesting he looked prepared rather than shocked. Even a blurry picture of my truck at a gas station weeks earlier, which she labeled evidence of accelerant purchases. The post spread like wildfire through the region. Grocery clerks I'd known for years avoided eye contact. At the hardware store, the cashier rang me up in silence, lips pursed. I felt like an outcast in the very town my family had helped build. Caleb's friends stopped messaging him. He sat at the table one evening, staring into nothing. "It feels like we're the criminals," he whispered. That night I called a law firm in Denver. Sarah Chen, a property rights attorney, listened to my story with professional detachment until I played her the audio recording from the night of the fire. Linda's voice rang out. "I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time." There was a long pause. Then Sarah's voice shifted, sharp, precise. "Mr. Hayes, obstruction of emergency services is a federal crime. If what I just heard is authentic, this isn't a civil matter anymore. This is criminal." Within 24 hours, I had filed a formal complaint. Sarah connected me with contacts in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Suddenly, Linda's smug live streams and phony violation notices weren't just HOA theatrics, they were federal evidence. But Linda fought back harder. She doubled down on social media, accusing me of forging evidence, of conspiring with Martha, even of bribing the fire department. She painted herself as a martyr, a woman persecuted for protecting community standards, and, disturbingly, some people believed her. The pressure weighed heavy on Caleb. One night, he looked at me across the table, his voice trembling. "Dad, you taught me about standing up for what's right. But right now, it looks like you're just letting her win. When are you going to prove everything you taught me actually means something?" His words cut deeper than any of Linda's lies. Because I knew he was right. Waiting wasn't enough anymore. It was time to act. And what I didn't yet realize was that the fight had already drawn bigger eyes than either of us imagined. The FBI was watching, and Linda's little empire of clipboards and Facebook groups was about to come crashing down under the weight of federal law. The knock came on a Thursday morning, sharp and deliberate, not the kind of hesitant tap you get from neighbors. I opened the door to find a woman in a tailored navy coat standing on my porch, her badge already displayed. "Mr. Hayes," she asked. Her tone was clipped professional. "Agent Sarah Morgan, Federal Bureau of Investigation. May I come in?" For a moment I thought it was another cruel twist, some new ploy orchestrated by Linda. But when I studied her eyes, calm, unwavering, I knew this was different. This wasn't theatrics. This was law. Inside, she sat at my kitchen table, spreading out files from a leather case. Caleb hovered nearby, listening intently. "We've been monitoring a series of suspicious fires in mountain communities over the last 18 months, Agent Morgan began. 7 incidents in Colorado alone, all tied to homeowners associations, all following disputes similar to yours. Properties that resisted HOA demands ended up in ashes." Her words sank in slowly, like ice cracking across a frozen pond. "You're telling me Linda isn't just some power-hungry busybody?" I asked. Agent Morgan shook her head. "She's part of something larger. A development scheme. After each fire shell, companies purchased the lots companies tied to a casino consortium out of Nevada. And wouldn't you know, Miss Marshall received consulting fees after every incident. We've tracked nearly $400,000 deposited into accounts linked to her." Caleb's jaw dropped. "So, she's burning people out just to sell the land." "Exactly," Morgan said. "And here's where you come in. Your recording of her blocking emergency services, that's the first direct piece of evidence we've had. Up until now, it's been circumstantial financial trails, patterns, suspicions. But Linda's arrogance may have handed us the smoking gun." I leaned back, my pulse hammering. All those nights I'd thought she was just a petty tyrant with a clipboard, but she wasn't playing small games. She was part of organized crime. Agent Morgan pulled out a map dotted with red pins across the Rockies. "These fires aren't accidents. They're part of a pattern of forced acquisitions. Your cabin was just the latest target." She paused, her gaze steady. "With your cooperation, we can build a federal case. But you need to understand this won't be easy. She'll fight dirty." I thought of Linda's smug face lit by flames, her voice gloating about finally teaching us a lesson. I thought of Caleb's tears on the stone foundation. "Agent Morgan," I said quietly, "I'm in." That afternoon we began assembling the case. I handed over my binder of evidence, every violation letter, every social media post, Martha's security footage, and most importantly, the audio recording from the night of the fire. Morgan's eyes lit with satisfaction as Linda's voice filled the kitchen. "I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. This is it," Morgan said. "Combined with the financial records we've subpoenaed, this proves intent, obstruction, and conspiracy." Caleb, for the first time in weeks, looked hopeful. "So, she's going to jail." Eventually, Morgan cautioned, "But the wheels of justice turn slowly. First we build, then we strike." Over the following weeks, my house became an unofficial operations center. Morgan visited regularly, cross-checking my notes with FBI files. Caleb helped by organizing timelines on spreadsheets, his teenage energy finally directed at something beyond despair. Martha dropped off baked goods, and gossip her sharp memory, filling in gaps about Linda's first months in Silver Creek. Meanwhile, Linda doubled down on her campaign. She posted videos accusing me of fabricating evidence called Martha Senile, and claimed the FBI had been infiltrated by corrupt insiders. Her words grew more desperate, more unhinged, and yet her following grew. Conspiracy theorists from across the state flocked to her page, feeding off the drama. Some even drove up the mountain to film our burned cabin, posting commentary about insurance fraud. It was suffocating. Every trip to town I felt eyes on me. Caleb's classmates whispered. But I clung to Morgan's words, build, then strike. Finally, the strike came. Morgan invited me to Denver to sit in on a strategy meeting with federal prosecutors. Walking into that conference room felt surreal. Suits, laptops, stacks of binders, thicker than any HOA bylaws. They laid out the case like a puzzle, piece by piece. Linda's fake violation notices her expired term, her live streams, the payments from shell companies, and finally my recording. This isn't just HOA abuse, one prosecutor said. This is racketeering, conspiracy to commit arson, wire fraud, mail fraud. We're talking decades in federal prison. For the first time, I allowed myself a flicker of satisfaction. Back in Silver Creek, I knew the end game was approaching. Linda could sense it too. She grew more erratic, showing up at neighbors' houses unannounced, waving her clipboard like a weapon. One evening, as Caleb and I drove home, we spotted her SUV parked near our ruins, again headlights off as though she were watching. My stomach knotted. She was cornered, and cornered people are dangerous. The turning point came when the FBI secured a warrant for her financials. What they found went beyond anything I imagined ties to developers, not just in Colorado, but across 3 states. Her consulting fees were payments for every fire that cleared a stubborn homeowner off valuable land. She wasn't a petty tyrant. She was a cog in a machine worth tens of millions. Morgan delivered the news with grim finality. We've got her. It's time. And so the stage was set. Linda Marshall believed she was untouchable, still strutting through town in her red blazer, live streaming her community updates. But soon she would walk into a courtroom, not as a president enforcing regulations, but as a criminal defendant staring down federal charges. I watched Caleb that night as he sat on the foundation stones of our burned cabin. The fire's scars were still raw in his eyes, but behind them I saw something else resolve. "Dad," he said, his voice steady, "she's not going to get away with this, is she?" "No," I answered. "She's finally going to learn the difference between fake power and real justice." What I didn't yet know was how poetic that justice would be. Because when Linda finally faced the gavel, the judge who would preside over her downfall was someone she never expected, a man who had taught me everything I knew about patience, preparation, and the power of truth. The morning of the federal hearing dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that feels like it's holding its breath. Caleb and I drove into Denver, the city towers rising out of the haze, as if we were entering another world entirely. My stomach churned not from fear, but from anticipation. After months of intimidation lies and firelit devastation, Linda Marshall was finally about to face something she could not manipulate: federal justice. She arrived at the courthouse in her trademark red blazer, a color chosen not for modesty but for spectacle. Her husband trailed behind her carrying a leather briefcase, while Jessica filmed the procession on her phone, no doubt streaming live to her loyal band of online followers. Linda's smile was brittle but confident. She strutted past reporters as though the trial itself were just another HOA meeting she could dominate with volume and a pink clipboard. Inside, the courtroom hummed with restrained energy. Federal agents filled the benches, prosecutors stacked files in neat towers, and a handful of Silver Creek residents sat in the gallery, including Martha Johnson, her spine straight as a rifle. Caleb sat beside me, his fists clenched tight in his lap. Then came the moment that changed everything. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Hayes." Linda's confident smirk froze, then cracked. Her eyes darted to the nameplate on the bench, then to me, and back again. Realization dawned slowly, almost comically. The man she was about to face wasn't just any judge. He was my father, the man she had mocked, the family legacy she had tried to erase with fire. My father entered with measured dignity, his black robe settling like armor across his shoulders. His gaze swept the courtroom, pausing briefly on me and Caleb, but his expression was neutral, professional. He was no longer my father in that moment. He was Judge Hayes, a man with decades of federal service behind him, known for his unshakable impartiality. Linda's attorney leapt to his feet, crying bias, demanding recusal. My father's response was precise, unyielding. Family connection is not sufficient grounds for recusal in federal proceedings. File the appropriate motion with evidence if you wish, counselor. Until then, this court proceeds. The trial began, and piece by piece, the prosecutors dismantled Linda's carefully crafted image. Agent Morgan presented financial records tracing consulting payments from shell corporations to Linda's accounts. Charts showed a disturbing pattern. Every fire coincided with a payout. Then came Martha's security footage, grainy but damning: Linda's SUV circling our property late at night, Jessica stepping out with a flashlight, and finally the recording. Linda's own voice echoed through the courtroom, smug and unrepentant. "I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Caleb stared straight ahead, his face pale but resolute. For the first time, I saw pride in his eyes again. Linda tried to fight back. She claimed the audio was doctored, that the FBI was in league with my family, that the fire was an insurance scam orchestrated by us. But each lie fell flat under the weight of evidence. Every desperate outburst only eroded her credibility further. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sweat darkening his collar, while Jessica's phone slowly lowered, as even she seemed to realize the livestream narrative had collapsed. My father listened with calm patience, the same patience he had taught me as a boy. When the time came for him to speak, his words carried the quiet weight of truth. "Marshall," he said, "you appear to be confusing federal court with a neighborhood meeting. Authority here is not performed for cameras or clipboards. It is earned through law, evidence, and truth. And the truth is clear: you obstructed emergency services, engaged in conspiracy, and destroyed the lives of families for profit." The gavel struck like thunder. Linda Marshall was referred for federal prosecution on charges of arson, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, and racketeering. The red blazer that had once projected power now looked garish, almost pathetic, under the sterile light of the courtroom. For the first time since the night of the fire, I felt air rush into my lungs like freedom. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones pressed forward, questions hurled like arrows. But I didn't need to answer. The evidence had spoken. Linda had written her own downfall with every smug livestream, every violation, notice every careless word. She had mistaken cruelty for authority, and now she would pay the price. Weeks later, when sentencing came, the courtroom was packed with victims from across Colorado, families who had lost homes in fires Linda's network had orchestrated. My father's verdict was final: 15 years in federal prison, 10 years supervised release, and restitution of over $3 million. Linda stood pale, trembling, her voice cracking as she tried one last time to claim persecution. But no one believed her anymore. Not the judge, not the jury, not even her own daughter, who stared at the floor with shame. Afterward, Caleb and I returned to the ruins of our cabin. Snow had settled over the blackened stones, softening the scars. Construction crews would come soon, rebuilding, with the insurance payout finally released. But for that moment, it was just us. Caleb touched the chimney, the last piece of his great-grandfather's work still standing. "We did it, Dad," he whispered. "We proved her wrong." I put an arm around him. "No, son. We proved that truth outlasts lies. Always." As the wind whispered through the pines, I realized that Linda's fire hadn't destroyed our legacy, it had tempered it. Like steel forged in flame, we were stronger now. And her name would be remembered not as an enforcer of rules, but as a cautionary tale of what happens when power is stolen instead of earned. When the smoke finally cleared and the gavel struck its last blow, I understood something I hadn't before. Real power is never in the hands of those who shout the loudest or wield clipboards like weapons. It lives in patience, preparation, and the courage to stand firm, even when lies spread faster than truth. Linda Marshall thought intimidation and spectacle could erase decades of history, but in the end she exposed herself. My son Caleb learned a lesson no textbook could teach: that anger may feel powerful in the moment, but discipline and evidence are what turn battles into victories. To anyone watching this story, don't let fear silence you when facing corruption, cruelty, or fake authority. Document everything. Trust the truth even when it feels buried. And above all, believe that justice, though slow, does come. Have you ever faced someone who abused power to tear down what you built? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you believe in stories where truth defeats manipulation, subscribe to this channel. Together, we can build a community where real justice always wins.